Hello and good evening. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Wyatt Sharp. We begin tonight with breaking news pertaining to the 2024 presidential race, as Florida Governor Ron Desantis has officially launched his bid for president. Now, many people were noting across various social media platforms that they believe his campaign announcement went sideways. In many respects, it did. Of course, DeSantis announced his run for the Oval Office via Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk, who acquired the social media giant just last year. Many people believed that Musk would be able to restore integrity, as many people claimed, to the platform of Twitter. However, as DeSantis announced his campaign for president via the Twitter platform tonight, specifically something called Twitter Spaces, it was over 20 minutes late when they did begin. There were several technology issues. Several Twitter users also reported issues with the platform repeatedly crashing. A lot of political consultants, various people are noting, in the DeSantis campaign are probably scared that this is how their campaign began. The question now, can they recover from a moment like what took place tonight? How can they advance from what happened to get on into the campaign, establish a better press advance strategy, and actually talk about the issues that are important to the American people? Those are some of the things that we are going to be talking about on the program tonight with our wide variety of guests. But this is an important update to the 2024 presidential race. DeSantis, many people believe, will be Donald Trump's biggest rival in the campaign. Many people believe Donald Trump will be the main rival of Ron DeSantis. It goes both ways in 2024. But of course, there are some other candidates. While they are not as popular, while they are not polling as high as someone like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis, they announced earlier on, and ever since then, they have been crisscrossing the United States, trying to convince GOP primary voters that their vision is the right vision for the United States. There are several candidates in the running, ranging from Nikki Haley, the former governor of South Carolina, who notably was also the former ambassador to the United Nations under President Donald Trump. Now, also running is former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson, who you heard from recently on the program talking about his plan and his vision for the United States, as well as the southern border, how he would restore integrity to that file. As he claims, he also claims that the Biden administration has not been doing enough on that issue. And there's other people running as well, like small businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, a large variety of candidates who are in the running. But tonight's announcement really changes things because as of this point in time, Donald Trump, who many believe is the main frontrunner, certainly the polls suggest that, Donald Trump has been putting the vast majority of his campaign dollars into trying to weaken the DeSantis campaign. He is, as many people have noted, most worried and most concerned about DeSantis. You saw when Tim Scott announced his presidential campaign, the Trump campaign almost immediately after, within just hours of the announcement, the Trump campaign put out a statement wishing Senator Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina who's running for president, wishing him good luck in his presidential bid. It's been far from that with someone like Ron DeSantis, where both Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis have been going after each other for the past long while. Several strategists and pundits are also noting that that will likely only get worse as this campaign advances forward. Remember, we're still in the early stages of the campaign. The presidential election is not going to take place until 2024, and a lot of hot button issues are still on the table, and other issues likely will arise as well. The state of the cost of living in the United States, that could be vastly different than what it is now by the time the 2024 campaign comes around. The very ideas and issues that the candidates arise throughout this campaign, the candidates themselves, that could be very different compared from right now to the actual lead up to the very first primaries in the campaign and then advancing into the general election. We will have all of this coverage for you on the program tonight. Stay with us. I want to turn now to Joe Walsh, former GOP congressman, former presidential candidate. I want to ask him as well about some of the specific and substantial policy issues that will be getting a lot of discussion. Joe himself is a conservative. He says that he's a conservative, but he also says that he doesn't necessarily like being branded as a moderate as a result of people like Donald Trump swaying Republicans so far to the right that it illustrates someone like himself, like Asa Hutchinson, who I interviewed a couple of weeks ago on the program, as moderates. Former GOP Congressman Joe Welch. Joe, thanks so much for your time.
Wyatt, always good to be with you.
Thanks so much. Let's just start out with the announcement by the Florida Governor Ron Desantis that he is running for president. It's something that a lot of people had perhaps been expecting, but with a presidential race of this nature, specifically one that is going to be quite polarizing in many respects, as many pundits are predicting, Ron DeSantis now officially in the race. It seems like he will be Donald Trump's biggest competitor in this race. What do you make of the back and forth, though, between someone like him and Donald Trump, and also the fact that Donald Trump seems to be not going after other candidates, like, for example, Senator Tim Scott, as heavily as someone like DeSantis?
Here's what we know, Wyatt. The Republican Party wants a bully to be their nominee. They want someone cruel and authoritarian and intolerant. That's always been Donald Trump. The only other Republican candidate who fits that bill a little bit, a bully, is Ron DeSantis, which is why DeSantis has been doing pretty well in the polls the past year. So it's not a surprise that he's finally in, because there are a lot of Republican establishment people, Wyatt, who don't want Trump to be the nominee, and they've put all their chips on DeSantis.
And I've invited all of the candidates running to join me on the show. And one of the interesting conversations I had was with Asa Hutchinson, who is quite moderate, I guess you could say, or he is still quite a conservative, but compared to today's standard of conservative and the types of conservatives within the Republican Party, you know, a lot of Democrats would repeatedly praise Asa Hutchinson over the course of the Trump administration for not being, you know, as afraid as perhaps others to come out and speak out about someone like Donald Trump. What do you make of the place in the race for someone like Asa Hutchinson or other moderates that may enter the race in, you know, the times where Ron DeSantis is announcing that he is also running? And as you point out, how is that any different with Ron DeSantis than someone like Donald Trump?
There's no place for Asa Hutchinson in this race. And let's be clear about something, Wyatt. Before Trump, you were a conservative or a moderate based on where you stood on the issues. I mean, now, post-Trump, it's where you stand on Trump. Asa Hutchinson's a conservative. I'm still a Tea Party conservative, but we're considered moderates or whatever because we oppose Trump. Look, there's only one lane in this Republican Party, and that's the Trumpy lane. That's the lane that Trump is in. It's the lane DeSantis wants to be in. There's no room for an anti-Trump or even a critical Trump candidate.
And so when you look at what the impact could be, I mean, when you look at the most recent midterm elections, for an example, and how some of the Republican primaries unfolded, you have people like Liz Cheney and other representatives on the Republican side who a candidate primaried them, oftentimes a Trump-endorsed candidate primaried them, and then they ended up losing, unfortunately for them. So what is the likeliness that the Republican Party abandons someone like Donald Trump, who has had a very big impact on the GOP movement, as you point out, and goes for someone like a, you know, Ron DeSantis?
Well, look, it's Trump's party. And if not Trump himself, Wyatt, again, the party is now, it's a Trumpy party. It's Trump and it's Trumpism. What is Trumpism? It's nationalistic. It's intolerance. It's going after all the stuff they call woke culture. This is the animating force in the party. There's no room for people like me or Adam Kinzinger, my colleague, or Liz Cheney, people who traditionally stand for freedom, free trade, free markets. Now it's all about, beating up your enemies. That's what this party wants. Trump's the best at it. DeSantis is trying to knock him off that hill.
And just before we conclude, I mean, when I look at the conversations I've had and what I've been observing, it seems as if a lot of the focus on the GOP primary right now has become more so about the candidates and more so about the personality aspect of things than it has about the policies and about what the GOP should actually focus on as they move into the presidential election in 2024. Again, when I talked to Asa Hutchinson, he brought up the southern border, he brought up wanting to restore integrity, a lot of different issues. How can the Republicans really be credible and maintain credible perspectives on those issues if they seem to, at this point, be quite focused on, the personality aspect of things?
You know what, Wyatt? The rest of the world needs to wake up to the fact that we have two major political parties in this country, in America, and one of our two major political parties has become radicalized. And that means like issues don't matter anymore. It's all about revenge. It's all about being a bully. It's all about thumbing your nose at the rest of the world. These are the things now this Republican Party stands for. And Wyatt, I don't believe it's changing anytime soon.
All right, former GOP Congressman Joe Walsh. Thanks so much, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Wyatt.
All right. Let's go now to thehill.com's Niall Stanage. He is with us live to discuss what this could potentially mean moving forward for the 2024 presidential race and what some political consultants, frankly, not just in the DeSantis campaign, but also those in Team Trump who are likely celebrating. You already saw publicly folks in Team Biden celebrating. They posted a tweet on Twitter just minutes after some of these delays and issues were being experienced, essentially making fun of the situation. They posted a link to the Democratic Party's fundraising donation link saying, click here, this link works, making fun of the fact that the Twitter Spaces where Governor DeSantis announced his campaign did not work. So I want to ask Niall about some of those issues and how they could potentially shape the 2024 race. Joining me now is thehill.com's Niall Stanage. Niall, thanks for making the time.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
So let's start out with the context in which the announcement by Governor Ron DeSantis was delivered. It was kind of a disaster, so to speak, not necessarily with the contents of the announcement, but in the way in which it was delivered. There was a large variety of technical issues that it didn't even get officially started until about 20 minutes past the start time. I imagine a lot of political consultants are probably rethinking some of their decisions here.
I imagine so. It was really pretty embarrassing for Governor DeSantis, the degree to which there were technical difficulties that really have overshadowed anything that he had to say. There was a lot of hype, as you know, before the announcement about the fact that this was going to be Twitter Spaces. It was going to be purportedly using tech and social media in an innovative way. And, well, I don't know if it was innovative or not, but it certainly wasn't effective because of all of those disruptions.
And what does this say? I mean, a lot of the folks on, for example, Team Trump, a lot of people you saw, for example, President Biden and his campaign account for 2024 kind of mocking what was taking place here. A lot of people are finding this funny. A lot of people making light of the situation, practically everyone, unless you're in the DeSantis campaign. But looking at what the actual announcement itself means more broadly, of course, he's running. Senator Tim Scott announced he was running on Monday. To what degree do these types of candidates who are announcing they're running pose a potential threat to someone like Donald Trump?
So right now, what we can say is that former President Trump is the clear frontrunner. In the national polling averages, he's up by something of the order of 30 points. Now, politics can change very fast. People who are frontrunners at the start of campaigns often aren't the winner in the end. But I mean, clearly the Trump camp is taking quite an amount of glee from this rather sketchy or ineffective DeSantis launch. So that will be that'll put wind in the Trump sails, so to speak, and it's an embarrassing start for Governor DeSantis. That's not to say that he cannot recover from it. I think he can. I think it's just one of those things that gets marked down into the annals of sort of campaign embarrassments or political embarrassments.
And I want to conclude now with someone who is running for president. You've also seen him before on the show. Steve Laffey is his name. He is well known within the GOP, within the Republican Party, and a Democratic strategist to get both sides of the political spectrum. And let me tell you something that I appreciate about both Steve and Joel. They both can have a conversation, whether you're Democrat or Republican or whatever side of the political spectrum, liberal, conservative, wherever you fall on the political spectrum, it is important to have a conversation. And so whenever people are willing to have conversations with one another, I'm willing to provide that platform, ask them the questions, and get two perspectives on substantial issues, very important issues that is impacting political discourse in the United States as we head in to 2024. Joining me now is Steve Laffey, a candidate for the GOP for the Republican nomination in 2024, and Democratic strategist Joel Rubin. Hello to the both of you.
Hi, Wyatt.
Steve, let me just start out with you, specifically with what Governor DeSantis, who is running for president for the GOP for the nomination, as he's announced this evening in quite a disaster of a campaign launch, to put it frankly. Obviously not what people on Team DeSantis were hoping for, not necessarily with the contents of the announcement, but the way in which it was delivered. He delivered it on Twitter, and there was a large number of issues with the actual technology side of things, which made people even on the Biden campaign, for example, tweeting about it and mocking the DeSantis campaign launch in a number of respects, which I guess is kind of a separate issue. But the fact that Governor DeSantis is now in the race, that he is running for president, he's joining, of course, former President Trump, lots of other candidates, people like yourself as well. What do you make of that?
Well, there's a German word for it, I suppose, Schadenfreude, where I'm half joking, but listen, Ron DeSantis, Governor DeSantis, has done so many things in the last 3 months, getting ready to run, and so many mistakes. And the biggest mistake, I think, is saying things that he knows are not true. So when he said that SVB Bank went broke because it was woke, he knew that wasn't true. I knew it wasn't true. He's a smart man. He went to Harvard Law. He's not a financial expert like me, but someone would have explained to him interest rate risk and credit risk and deposit risk and what happens when you take in all these deposits and then use 30-year treasuries to hedge it. It's stupid. But he would know that. So when he says these things, and then in addition goes after Disney and then loses $1 billion for his citizens and investments, these are really bad things. It would have been better for him just to be the governor and surprise us all with an announcement. Again, I'm not his political advisor. That seemingly would have been better. The whole thing's been a disaster, and that's why I think it's over for him. And I'd rather be where I am, quite frankly, the Herman Cain of 2024 that nobody knows yet. Although I just came out in the Boston Globe again, and so things are happening. And I'd rather be that in a small growth stock than someone starting at 32 going to 18 before they announce. Never happened. Joel could tell us. I don't think it's ever happened.
And I mean, Joel, when you look at what's happening on the Democratic side of things and how they could potentially counter what's happening on the Republican side of things, of course, Governor DeSantis isn't the only one who's announced. As of recently, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott also announced that he was running on Monday in a campaign event that had a lot of less technological issues, so to speak. When you look at all of the people that are running, the amount of people who have stepped up to challenge former President Trump, I mean, definitely a large number of people, perhaps not as large as some people were expecting. I mean, when you look at the Democratic primary, for example, in 2020, there was, I believe, 20 candidates, over 20 candidates who officially participated in the debate. Mm-hmm. So I guess, how can the Democrats counter all of these announcements that are coming out by the Republicans? And with Governor DeSantis now announcing, to what extent does he pose a threat to someone like President Biden in 2024?
Well, Wyatt, if today was the kickoff day for the 2024 primary for Republicans, I think for Democrats, we just sit back and have our popcorn and watch the show, because it's going to be a mess. And there are a lot of good people running. And Steve, congratulations as well. I mean, putting your hat in the ring is a testament to internal vision and courage. And so I congratulate you. But I got to tell you, Donald Trump, he's hovering at around 50%. And for someone to catch him, they have to get him to go under that level. And I have no idea what's going to make him go under that level. after being indicted, after losing a defamation case, after getting walloped in his endorsements in 2022, after losing the 2020 election, after an insurrection in his name that he doesn't want to be really admitting to being part of, after his election denialism, and he's still over 50%. So from a Democratic perspective, it makes no sense, but that's where the Republican base is right now. And for Ron DeSantis, yeah, he swung for the fences and he really struck out tonight.
And Steve, a lot of Republicans, even themselves, are acknowledging that unity will be an issue for the party after the primary, given that there's all of these candidates who are running. All of them feel that they're obviously, better poised than others to serve in the Oval Office and to be the nominee, specifically with someone like Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. Obviously, both of them feel like they are each other's number one rival. Both of them feel like they, each of them pose the most credible threat to one another. When you hear, someone like Joel, for example, talking about how Democrats are able to, not really have to pay too much attention and worry too much about, things that, for example, would have happened tonight. How can the Republicans move past this? How do you unite after the primary with such a divisive start, you could say?
It's nearly impossible for Republicans, but very much part of the Democratic Party. It's to their advantage. Democrats, this is my opinion, tend to, when it's over, say, yep, here we're going, and they're better at getting the vote out with the early voting that happens, which I disagree with, but they're better at it. Republicans need a early primary so people can forget and heal wounds like April of the year, right? They don't always get it. So that won't happen. I think, I'm just going to tell you, I think that Joel has some great points, and I just want to add, I put in the Boston Globe today, they wrote about the fact how disgraceful President Trump's performance at the town hall at St. Anselm's was. Yeah. To see, now I have no knowledge of what happened personally, but to see people in the stands who must have been placed there, seemingly being Republicans, because they're at a Republican event, laughing and joking over a sexual assault, is unforgivable for St. Anselm's, which is a Catholic university. It's unforgivable for Donald Trump. It's unforgivable that no other Republican has called it out but me. It's an American thing. Like, I didn't grow up to boo stuff at a Red Sox Yankees game. I would have had the backhand of a parent or an uncle or somebody. These things just shouldn't happen. Miss Green from Mississippi booing the president from the stands at a State of the Union in my lifetime. So there's a part of our party which is totally disgraceful. If you ask what I'm doing, it's simply that at stevelaffey.com, I have complete solutions that are in many ways third-rail issues, but when you put them together, they're the 5 issues that Donald Trump cannot debate. And I predict by September, October, some people may say, is there a serious person in the room? It's not Ron DeSantis. I hope it's me.
And Joel, just before we conclude also now, when looking at what both the Democrats and the Republicans need to do in 2024, to be completely honest, a lot of people who I talk with and a lot of people who have come on my show have come to a similar thesis, a similar consensus as to what they feel, saying that, both of these two candidates, they both ran in 2020. President Biden, Democrats believe he had a lot of success. Republicans, even some Republicans are still staying and still closely aligned with the former president. Some of them have spoken out about the former president. But a lot of people also are just wondering if really, someone asked me the other day when they were on my show, if this is the best that either of the two parties can do, if this is the best that they can nominate. I'm just wondering, do you think that will be perhaps the challenge in 2024? And would the Democrats, for example, not be better off to go with perhaps a more younger candidate, and same goes for the Republicans?
Well, this is democracy, and those who put their name forward are the ones that are considered. There's no party boss structure out there identifying who gets to run. Now, certainly people are considering it, talk to folks about whether or not they're viable. But really, this is about the individual stepping up. And in the case of Joe Biden, he's stepped up many times throughout his career. He's been elected, God knows, probably a dozen times. He's lost for president before. He worked really hard this last cycle. He was losing in the beginning. He came back. And it's because the voters put him there. And so I think that really the Democratic Party, we're looking at President Biden and we're saying, we're satisfied with what he's achieved. There are questions about whether or not he should run again, but there aren't questions about whether or not what he's done has been effective and positive for the country. That you see across the board, a lot of support for. So I don't think that there's anyone that's going to be installed, because it's just not how we do it. And I don't think that serious Democrats will challenge the president, because people are satisfied with what he's provided.